I've got more questions for you, but I know we're running right up to the end of our time. I did want to ask you just a little bit about research for the story and also how you settled on language for the story, because all the characters are consistently speaking a dialect that's true to their region, but it's not that far off from what we're used to in stories. We're not going to have to struggle with, I think the first part of learning to read a Twain novel is getting ready for that dialect. Get past that, and then you're there. So how did you decide on language, and then also how much research did you do to create your world, and how did you go about doing it?
Wow, lots of big questions.
I'm trying to cram them all in before we got to call it.
Yeah, I didn't. I am a language and words person. I love to play with sounds and words, and I'm also a poet. So a lot of it began with writing the Lament of Nuaga, which had to be written before I got pretty far in the story, because so much of the history and the story is related to that lament. And so I wrote that with a certain meter, a certain rhythm, that so that the language needed to flow out of that, just from a poem standpoint. And also I had the people who still believed in dragons, who in my story are referred to it as the ancient language. I think that they still have the ancient language, whereas all the other people who have names that are born out of nature, like Rain and Storm, her sister's Willow, and sedge is actually a plant, a grass. So actually did a lot of research when I was trying to fill out all the rest of the names of all the men in her unit, because I wanted them to all be horticultural names. And I was running dry, so I spent a lot of time on, lists of herbs and things like that. To get, isn't it weird, the stuff you end up reading about? Like, why am I reading about these?
I figure the NSA, if they're monitoring my searches, is like, this guy's either a psychopath or a writer. It's one of those things.
Very fine line there, right? And how long does it take a dead body to decompose and all that scary stuff?
Oh, sure. Good stuff.
Oh, my gosh. So, the plants were nothing, right, compared to the dead body searches. So there was that. I didn't spend a whole lot of time researching the actual language, because I knew I wasn't going to actually have to develop it. I knew I wanted it to have a certain sound, and I think this is where my music comes in, because I hear them in my ear, and I know what I want them to sound like. So then I'll create a word almost because of the melody of it, if that makes sense. I actually write that way too. Sometimes I will construct a sentence because it sounds right, like a musical phrase. I call it the cadence of the sentence. So if I write a sentence, it needs to have a particular cadence. If an editor comes in and line edits that particular sentence, I won't buy it, because it's ruining the cadence of the sentence. It's not even a grammar thing. It's I don't know. I think that's my musician geek coming out, really. But that played it.
Are you able to effectively argue for that side with an editor who's just not hearing it?
Fortunately, so far, there hasn't been a lot of that going on. I got stuck on this is my grammar geek coming out. So in the first few pages of the story, we meet Rain's brother Storm and her sister Willow. And I did not have commas around those words because they were single word appositives, which don't need commas. So if I say my sister Willow, it doesn't need commas around Willow. But if I say Willow, comma, my sister, comma, then you need those commas, because my sister is the appositive, right?
Sure.
So my copy editor went in and stuck commas around them. So I wrote stet, and I'm like, no commas around one word appositives. Then my editor came back and said, well, this is our standard, and I came back with, no, you don't understand. I don't want commas around single word. So she said, it's okay. We're going to take them out. So they took them out for me.
But it's your name on the cover. To a certain degree, like if you wanted something like a monster, like 2 spaces after a period, or the space in the wrong spot around an ellipses,
Yeah.
Then I could understand, but
Sure. Yeah. You gotta pick your battles, right?
I am always on the side of the person whose name is on the cover, and if it's a bad book, well, we know who to blame. But don't let it be a bad book, and I should be blaming an editor I didn't know was responsible.
Right.